director, and we have a person running an innovation ecosystem. She's the head of promotion labs right at the end. So we'd love to hear from each of you. So Ben, why don't you give us a quick intro about, he's an amazing young CEO. He's checked all the dots. He's a PhD student from the UW, from electrical engineering. With his faculty member, he created a startup company which is creating wireless powered drones. So these drones never have to land. You can imagine, right? So these drones will always be powered. And he's gone through the whole ecosystem. What would you like to add to that?
So that's it. Yeah, thanks, Vikram. I'm Ben Waters. As Vikram said, I graduated in 2015 from UW in the electrical engineering department, and my advisor and I co-founded Wybotic. So we went through the process to license the patents and the technology that we had created over the 5 years that I was a grad student at UW. And we went on to raise a convertible note locally here in Seattle, and we've just recently raised a seed round for $2.5 million. So we've been in the company now for about 2 years and raised 2 rounds of funding. One in Seattle. This more recent round was a collaboration between some venture capitalists in the Bay Area and Seattle, and also internationally. And so it's been a learning experience for me to go through this process and to experience what it's like to grow a team, manage a team, grow it, research into a product, raise money, and co-motion certainly has been an important piece of Wybotic's growth. We're actually located here in this incubator, just in the back corner there, and it's been an exciting journey. So look forward to talking more about some of the things I've learned.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Haresh Ved. I started my journey in a startup without knowing what the startup world was way back when I came to this country as an engineering student. That led to a job at Microsoft, where I was fortunate to work in startup kind of divisions. First, the tablet PCs of the world that we were trying to introduce way back in, I believe it was 91. Then worked on Windows 95, subsequently worked on all kinds of pen computing, interesting products we're trying to, or solutions we're trying to create or help create by building the right platform and the operating system. The last product I worked at Microsoft was handheld computers and pocket PCs. Since then, I've been an angel investor for almost now 20 years. After that decade at Microsoft. So I've seen the scene grow from pretty much nothing to a very rich ecosystem right here. So 2000 is when I launched a small investment fund, Cronus Ventures, which is still active, and then we also launched TIE Seattle, which is a global nonprofit to promote entrepreneurship and giving back to the community. We have multiple programs in that organization. One of the programs I launched subsequently was the TIE Angels Group to bring in the element of capital and actually provide capital to companies. Otherwise, it all becomes academic. And even academia nowadays provide funding. So to make it easier on...
Are you saying there's something wrong about academia?
Oh, no. I want more. Academia has some of the biggest funding sources, right? I mean, they have such huge funds. But the idea was to help out entrepreneurs actually experiment and build companies, and anything you want to build takes funding. So that's what we thought was an important element that was missing. Subsequently, we also thought collaboration is a big thing, so we started collaborating with each and every organization here. I actually launched the TIE Angels Alliance program. TIE is a global nonprofit, as I said, 60 chapters in 18 countries. So the idea was to collaborate amongst all angel groups and provide the deal flow, funding opportunities, etc. across the globe. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. So I'm Elizabeth Scallon, and I have the great pleasure of working for Vikram here in CoMotion and running CoMotion Labs, which is a multi-industry lab system. I've been in the startup scene for since about 2005, when I joined a small startup as the 5th employee. We were part of the Accelerator Corp, so saw what that looked like, helping out other small startup companies. We raised over $35 million and grew up to 50 people. Then during the recession, we downsized, and we actually created our own incubator to help other biotech companies in the Seattle area. We housed over another 5 companies there, and then finally we sold our company, and then I joined the team here to build out our biotech incubator. So originally in 2013, it was for here in the UW, we had 15 startups when we started. So it's been really fun to watch how we've grown from 15 startups to now over 80, as Vikram was mentioning. So my background's in undergrad in biochemistry, and then I have a global MBA. So traveled the world, understood different innovation ecosystems, but also about how to support entrepreneurs from the very beginning through incubator styles, accelerators, to what we have today. So it's been really fun.
Thank you. So Ben, you talked about raising money here. So let's talk about that. What do you think of the investment climate here in Seattle? We all know about Silicon Valley and the amount of money there. How do you compare, contrast? What are the gaps, if any, that you see here in the investment community?
Yeah, I'll maybe just elaborate quickly on what my experience was and then answer that question. So when we decided we were going to start the company while I was still finishing my dissertation in grad school. So we officially incorporated the company, and the first set of funding we got was actually from CoMotion. It was I think it's now called the Innovation Gap Fund, is that right? And it's $50K, 40 of which can be used for basically commercializing the technology. 10K has to be used for business development. So in our case, it was primarily going to some trade shows, getting feedback from potential customers to understand, was the robotics market the right space for us to commercialize this technology? So that was really what got the company off the ground. And then we went through the license process, and by way of going through that, we met some folks who I think actually shared office space with CoMotion at the time. It's kind of a hybrid group between an angel group and a venture capital group. It's a conglomerate of angels who invest money into a fund. This fund was called the W Fund, and there's other similar angel groups and funds in the Seattle area. And so we met them, we pitched to them, and we were able to raise a convertible note from them. And then as the company grew, I think Wybotic is primarily a company that sells hardware, and we have some software as a service running on top of our system as it scales. However, Seattle is a challenging ecosystem to raise venture capital funding for hardware. I think that evolves naturally as a community has successful startups such as Microsoft that turn into these great companies, and people from there correspondingly start venture capital funds. So a lot of that knowledge and wealth in the Seattle area, I think, comes from software and life sciences predominantly. So I spent most of my time down in the Bay Area raising money from funds that were exclusively focused on robotics and hardware for the most part. And it was important for us to find a venture capital partner that understood the capitally intensive landscape of hardware and the fact that the robotics market is still early. So we really kind of, wanted to be upfront with our story and say, look, this year isn't going to be the year that we see massive, revenue growth. Are you okay with that?
No hockey stick.
We had the hockey stick, but
Later.
So I think coming back to the challenges of Seattle, I think there are good opportunities for companies who are in the markets of the ecosystems that venture capitalists are focused on here: software, life sciences for the most part, IoT, AR, VR. I think that's changing, but I think it's still a challenge that Seattle as a community has to work on. But I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity. So in our case, we found a lead investor who was actually an international investor. They're called Gene Capital, who co-led our round with VC from the Bay Area. And once that happened, then we were able to come back to Seattle and get some traction with local investors to follow on with our round. So I think the answer to your question is it's definitely a challenge, especially for businesses outside of, I think, the core investment ecosystem in terms of the market. But I think it's an opportunity for other funding opportunities to seek actively places like Seattle where there's a defined ecosystem for one area of technology, and inevitably with GIX and the just massive growth of I think the tech community in Seattle, there's going to be more hardware companies, there's going to be more companies doing all kinds of technology, so hopefully that
I think
answers.
to your question about what we can do, that's another thing that is there are potential investors looking at strategies around medium risk, medium term investment. I think it's a great place for that kind of investment here as well. So Harish, from the other sort of the investment viewpoint, there's a criticism sometimes that venture capital is going later and later because they'd rather have one low risk 50 million deal rather than 10 5 million deals, which you have to manage each one. And some of that gap is being taken by angels and super angels, but that there is a gap between the seed and the venture, and that gap is growing, especially in Seattle, but also other places. What's your view on that, and how do we counter that, if that's true?
So can you all hear me? Do we need the mic?
We need the mic.
Oh,
Yes.
we do need, okay. So yes, I think the whole definition of investment is changing. The whole definition of companies and entrepreneurship is changing in terms of angel investing. Angel investing early on, when it started, was all about that initial risk which came after your friends and family funding. And there was no concept of going to market or building that MVP, or it was even before that, getting at the idea stage. But nowadays, if we look at it, even angel investors are asking, where's the MVP? What's your go-to-market strategy? So there has been a shift. The second key point is the amount of capital required, which is a lot less today, especially software, not hardware or life sciences, where the investments are much higher. But in software, the requirement is a lot lower. So we see a lot of shift along from VCs coming in very early, angels going a little late, and somehow in making these investments. There are a lot of organizations now, angels, super angels, as you said. One thing about Seattle, what we've noticed is the super angels have reduced. The number of super angels, their active involvement has reduced quite a bit, which has added more pressure to companies in this middle stage, let's say post-seed to Series A. As Ben rightfully said, there was a problem because these super angels would step in and cover that gap very well, which is kind of shrinking. On the plus side, these VCs have started investing a little early, so they are trying to cover that gap. In terms of the whole scenario, the investment stages, if you will, from idea to pre-seed to seed to A, B, C, and nowadays companies are staying private a lot longer. We are looking at C, D, and E, which is a bit surprising because people are not confident that IPOs, whether to go IPO, what happens when we go public, what happens. But to address the $50 million range question, it's very tricky. If we look at the exits, that also gives us an idea of why that has become a problem. More than, I think 70% of the startups actually, has an exit very early on. Within the first year or two, and that includes companies that do not make it. The next stage is the companies where they raise $2 to $5 million, whatever it is, with a hope of growing to the next $50 to $100 million companies. So these companies also have a challenge in terms of raising funds, but they still manage. Locally, we have a few good active angels, mostly software deals again, and life science is also getting a lot of funding. So they do manage to get that funding here from Madronas, Ignitions, Mavrons, Trilogies of Seattle. So that is still okay, but then is the huge void. There is no real fund or company, capital investment bank or a private equity firm in Seattle that really helps fund those kind of companies. So that's when your immediate existing investors play a major role in making those connections with investors in the Bay Area predominantly. And that's where most of the funding happens. For instance, one of the latest unicorns in Seattle, OfferUp, it raised $130 million. It's a unicorn, so $1 billion plus. But all the monies, most of the monies came from the Bay Area, which is Andreessen Horowitz and Warburg Pincus and all. But that tells us a story that nowadays we actually have a lot of partnerships with VC funds in the Bay Area, in Colorado. There have been a lot of collaborations. So they are also looking to invest in companies in Seattle. But in Seattle, there is definitely a problem. The companies have to create their presence early on as they are building to be able to get that funding.
Right. Yeah. Elizabeth, sort of related to investment, but more in your portfolio. There's a lot of talk around incubators and accelerators, and there's lots of recent analysis that most of them don't work. So what's the difference between a successful incubator and one which is not? And we all know about Y Combinator in the Bay Area. And do you see accelerators and incubators as two different things? Are there multiple models? What's happening to that market? How do you see that going? Because you keep an eye on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess to me, co-working, incubation, and accelerators are used interchangeably. They're technically completely three different models. Incubation started in 1959. First was just a co-housing where companies could just be located together but have smaller real estate. Then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, then they started doing services. And now there are incubators that don't even have a physical space because it's all about the resources together. Accelerators really popped up in the 90s, died with the dot-com, and then got reborn in the late 2000s. And that was all about how you got investors wanting to have an early look into startups who wanted to get involved in the pre-seed stage, but wanted to have more control. And so what they did is created more of these accelerator programs where they could pair them up with their mentors, their networks, their resources, and take them through a journey, and then be able to take a little bit of equity, and then before they did real funding, they would sort of go through these different gate steps. And so the last gating step would be the pitch session, where then they would invite their other investor community around to then co-invest and have bigger deal flow at the end of the pitch session once they were more confident in the team and the technology. What we're seeing though is that these sort of boot camps, these cohorts, when they're with the startups, are not providing the same value as before. Why? The world is more interconnected. We have access to these resources without having to give up our equity. And so accelerators are having a harder time to prove their value proposition of why would I give up 5% of my company for something that my lawyer could just make the same phone calls and give me the same introductions to, especially for a town that is maybe on a smaller scale. So Seattle is a big city. We're bigger than Boston now, 700,000 I think is the last count. But yet we still act like a big, small town in a lot of ways, where the networks and the entrepreneurial community is still pretty small, so you can get to know each other without needing necessarily those introductions of your accelerators. So the value proposition for giving up your equity right away isn't as valuable as it once was, and especially because you get a smaller stake of funding at the onset, and you got no promise note of money after the fact. So again, people are kind of reevaluating this as startups. Why would I need that? I can go get that education at the local universities or through my partnerships, or even online for absolutely free. And so now you're seeing where investors are doing more of these startup studios. We're seeing it with Kernel Labs, Pioneer Labs, where basically the investors then are saying, hey, we'll give the first $500,000, and we'll have the ideas that we want to get funded, and then we'll find the team. And we'll pair together the team and get it up to a point where then the other investor community would want to then engage with the technology once it's hit a technology milestone, or technology ready levelness, the DoD speak, right? At a certain point, then they'll start getting investment, and then they'll grow from that point. So I think what we're seeing is that the notion of giving up equity for networks isn't that important anymore due to technology connection tools such as LinkedIn even, or or even meetup groups where we're seeing more people with the buzz of entrepreneurship going, more people are wanting to make those connections organically rather than forced through a program. And then incubation, what's nice about that and what I love about the way that the university has created this program, it's all based on neutrality. So we do not take any equity or hold any IP in our startups. They do pay us to be here, and then we're allowed, and then from that we give them space, as Vikram said, services, networks, and learning opportunities, so that we are that neutral party to help them through this tremendous journey that isn't always straightforward, right? So the entrepreneurship journey has a lot of bumps and valleys, and sometimes they call them the valley of death and all these horrible sounding things. But yeah, it's a journey, right? There's no straight line. There's no definite pathway to get from A to B. And so what's nice about us is that we can then take that long journey. We're not a cohort model, so we can stay with them through those relationships, and as they need resources, we can then pair them up with the resources that we have within our group.
You don't even keep, the university, you don't even keep a piece of the IP that was developed on university grounds.
If it's developed in a research lab with funding which came with IP, then the university keeps some IP. So typically, if it's federal funding, the university will typically keep between 5 to 10% of equity of the startup. But more and more, we are seeing external inventors coming here, and that's been really interesting, and including bringing their IP and mixing it, and that's become very interesting in there. It's challenging to decide how much to keep, but the idea is keep less, get more things out, and eventually these companies, when they succeed, their founders will give back money to the university in different ways, right? And so, how much did Hewlett-Packard get on the way out from Stanford versus how much did they give back, right? So that virtuous cycle is what we're trying to create. So,
can I give a stab at it?
Yeah, sure. You only have 20 seconds.
20 seconds. I'll try. So I think the key thing about entrepreneurship is it is so unstructured. And trying to put a structure like an accelerator or incubator around something so unstructured, so uncertain, in itself is a challenge. And having early stage programs may help to an extent, but the key help these entrepreneurs need is with the business processes, product development, business models, customer acquisition, and funding support. So accelerators that can provide that are the ones, and incubators are meaningful and survive and succeed and do well, like Techstars over here and all. Others have a tough chance.
Keep talking.
So that's what we've seen in Seattle itself. Techstars, Y Combinator, there are a few models that work very well because they bring in they tie in the whole ecosystem. They bring in the right people with the right experience to guide them, which many accelerators cannot provide. And that is one of the key reasons they don't succeed, or it makes it a challenge.
Okay.
Secondly,
I have to stop with that because we have to get to Q&A from this topic group. So one last question. I promised you no politics and no tough questions, but I'm breaking both of those things. And the mayor is here. Seattle is an amazing city in terms of creating equity. With the recent election in the federal level, we've seen a divide. Right? There's people who feel part of this technology movement, people who feel they're not part of this. So how do you fix that in 30 seconds? How do you make people feel more included in this amazing innovation that is happening? We're seeing a city-rural divide. We're seeing a STEM, non-STEM divide. What are your magic bullets? I'm sure you think about this all the time, so you got an answer.
you want to start first?
What would be one step? What would be one step each of you might suggest?
Yeah, so I think you've talked a lot about ecosystem being a critical piece. And for me, I grew up down in the Bay Area and had a lot. I didn't go to Stanford, but I had a lot of friends that did go to Stanford, and there's very much an ecosystem there, especially among technical grad students and undergrads, where you come up with an idea, you find a group of friends, and you start a company, and that's just what you do. So I think regardless of sort of what's happening at the federal level, I've seen it impact. For example, some of the DOE SBIR grants are a little bit in question right now, but from a community level and from, I think, where things start at an idea level before they get to a point where something like that might implicate funding or otherwise. It's very much, about the ecosystem that's already, I think, inevitably started in Seattle. So at the grad school level, there are advisors from CoMotion actively, talking to grad students, making them aware of these resources that Elizabeth talked about. And those students can ask their professors who have started companies for the most part, how do you do this? Or, who's someone I can talk to about product development? In my case, who do I talk to about, raising money and putting together a financial plan to show investors? No idea. But when that ecosystem is there, those are just things that you can naturally overcome without having to have fully experienced, I think. So that is what I'd say. It doesn't directly answer the question, but I think the important piece is that the ecosystem exists now here, it's growing, and what happens at the federal level or the state level, I think, should support that ecosystem. That's what will grow the economy.
Nice answer, and you sidestepped my question, Joseph. Well done.
That was more than 30 seconds.
Right.
So you get 5.
You did what I was
So yeah, I think for me it is impossible to see a city which is non-technology or there's no divide per se. It'll just be technology all over. And I think it all starts early on, the education at the school level and beyond. There has to be reschooling, retooling of production, automation, which is happening, reschooling for each and everyone. I think it should be an important element at the school level, be it high school, college, whatever it is, to introduce an element of not only STEM, but certain level of statistics, because it's all about data crunching, etc. that will be required for analytics, deep learning, etc. Certain level of computer science. People will have to have a bit of knowledge of this. So these things have to be ingrained in these people to become contributing members of this society. Otherwise, it's going to be super difficult. And I have my future vision, which I can share separately if somebody's interested, but only in the interest of time I'll stop here.
Right. Thank you. Elizabeth, I'm going to cede your answer because they've talked a lot about technology. I know you also have another hat, which is the more inclusive part. Maybe you can start with that part.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, the non-technology part.
Well, I think that there's kind of two different places I'm going to go with that, so maybe I can connect them if you don't mind. So I think the first one too is go out into the community. So a lot of communities that we're seeing are left behind by technology, but yet there is a huge innovation capacity, right? So I think first of all, understanding that every community and every person in our society has the capacity to be innovative, right? Because what is innovation? Vikram definitely showed the 4 quadrants, but it's also just challenging the status quo at every moment, right? And so you can do that through social activism and creating equality within your neighborhoods. But there's also a point of where do we start clashing these groups together? And so in May, we actually kicked off our first VR pop-up shop, where we went into a neighborhood that's normally excluded from innovation and created a pop-up shop where we brought in our technology, our startups, our experts, and open it up to the community for free, where then the community start to engage with the technology, with the AR, VR, started talking to the experts, started talking to the startups, and gave them resources of how to connect and further the conversation, both in education, in online, different groups that was available, and different resources. And that was with the partnership with the City of Seattle and the Washington Technology Industry Association as well. So lots of different ways to connect, but it's again going to places, so it's not just staying in the Amazon building or the UW building, but really getting out to the community where they're at. So we went to the community center in South Seattle, New Holly, an area that is full of that is just south of Seattle, and an area that normally, like I said, is excluded from innovation. So I think starting there and being able to bring innovation to places that may have been left behind.
Great.
And
I'm going to stop you there, but I've got a lot of signals from the back. So, Talkative Crowd, please. This is a great set of entrepreneurs, investors. So.
Very interested to hear, perhaps from you, as far as international partnerships. For example, is there any opportunity for us to bring good, solid, high growth potential startups from, let's say, Canada or Belgium or somewhere into CoMotion?
Yeah, so actually that you mentioned that, we have a partnership going on right now, the State Department, for the Young Transatlantic Innovation Leadership Group. So with the State Department has identified entrepreneurs from Europe, and we're housing 7 of them right now, the Seattle chapter, all here for 2 weeks to then give them the Seattle innovation experience. So we're having
cool.
speakers come in, help them through their startups, getting them interconnected with our startups. We've actually housed multiple startups from different countries. One of the challenges that we have right now is visas. So the old administration was working
No
on...
politics.
Sorry. Well, so I would love to have a startup visa for America, and that's what I would love. And I would love to have exchanges where our startups could go to other countries and learn from the diversity and expertise from your countries. Our startups would just need some funding and some visas available.
So if we have a visa startup program in our country, would you be interested in having your entrepreneurs or students take advantage of that to start up something?
Absolutely, that's yes. Both
Okay.
from a understanding the culture viewpoint, also understanding the business models. We've seen that as students and entrepreneurs go to multiple places simultaneously rather than doing one at a time.
Yeah.
That really helps them.
Okay.
So that would be a great boon for many of us. Questions? Yes.
Yes, congratulations on your achievements today. To most of the people in this room, failure is just that, failure. But in the startup world, that's the opposite. That's another credential. Could you tell us from your experiences why 95% of all startups fail? That's across the board, not yours.
So yes, 2 points. Absolutely, failure is to be respected, not celebrated. We try not to celebrate failure because that creates a sort of a mediocre climate. But as long as there's some, there's a hypothesis, you test it, the hypothesis fails, there's some learning, you pivot. There are ways to do that. Now, there's a lot of analysis on why the startup success rate is so small. And I think, better than me, the recent discussion by the founder of LinkedIn, who was talking about this on his podcast, said, look, the fact that there's a startup idea means it's contrarian to start with. Otherwise, a big company would have done it already. So there's a gap. There's an assumption of a gap. So you're going in already trying to find a gap which is not being filled by amazing resources and large companies. So it's risky just to start with. And then once you scale, you're going to hit every kind of competition. Right? So I think the better thing to look at is the longitudinal success of an entrepreneur. So and the joke is if you do your 3rd startup first, you'll never fail. Right? So I think the learnings you get from the startups, if you look at an entrepreneur, if he or she keeps at it for a few years, they end up succeeding. So I think that's a nicer metric to look at. Any one idea, yes, will fail. In fact, there's a really good book which is called Why Most Valuable Things Fail. That's the name of the book. And there's actually analysis around if startups were too easy, then that means there's too many gaps left in this world, and that's also an issue. So I don't think we're going to see the increase in the success rate, but we can pivot early. We can kill startup ideas, not kill people, but the ideas early, right? So put in a little bit of capital, and that's I think what incubators and investors are getting very savvy at is do very quick tests, keep pivoting. So what you have at the end is very different from the beginning. I think that's the start of increasing the success of startups, right? But certainly failure is part and parcel of that. Other questions? Do we have time for one more? Or
I'll ask a question.
please.
I have a question about technology transfer. In many of the universities in Silicon Valley, particularly Stanford, and not so much Berkeley, the technology transfer office is a single monolithic activity and event. Less so in Berkeley, and I've suffered for that. I'm wondering about your university here. Is it spread throughout different pockets, or have you been able to actually concentrate it and make it more effective?
Right, so CoMotion is also the tech transfer hub. So it used to be just the tech transfer hub office. As the vision grew, it's now the innovation hub. But all the IP, all the equity, all the royalty, all the license comes through CoMotion. And what we have are tech managers who are experts in areas who go work with the faculty in units. But the actual negotiations, the licenses, the connections to industry is all done centrally through CoMotion. That's been very helpful because, first of all, it's interesting. For example, our School of Medicine has, I think, 6,000 faculty. And they are not aware, their leadership is not aware of what the new ideas are. we get all the invention disclosures, so we are able to give a report back looking at trends of where to invest money in terms of research.